my talk is probably going to be a bit less put together than compared to Rich's, but it's hopefully going to be interesting nonetheless. I don't have any slides. I just have browser tabs, but that's okay because most of this is going to be jumping into demos and poking around to see what happens when you try and run an Ember app, however small, in Vite. So for anybody who doesn't know anything about the Embroider Initiative, first of all, where have you been? Because it's a lot of stuff going on. If you want to read more about it, you can go to mainmatter.com/Embroider Initiative. The key idea, as summarized in the first section of the website, is we want to help finishing the code, the implementation of Embroider itself, and follow through on that and making it mainstream. And the reasoning or the motivation behind that is that as an Ember community, we benefit from the power of the herd or the safety of the herd. We have this concept that if everybody's kind of using the same tools, then we all get better together. And if we have some people on Embroider and a lot of people not on Embroider, that's not great for anybody. So that's the goal. We're not quite there yet. We're still working on it. I did a blog post. It feels like a month ago now, but it was only halfway through the month of November. That gave a bit of a blow-by-blow update of all of the things that we've been doing. This is a bit of a long blog post. I'm not going to read it all out here. I also encourage everybody to go and read it. This is on the blog. You can go to mainmatter.com, click the blog thing at the top, and you'll see this here somewhere. But, what's the point here? The point of this talk, the reason why we're all here, is we want to know how close we are to getting Ember working with Vite. We had an example at EmberConf of Ed putting together a Vite demo, and it was a good demo. It was technically Ember running through Vite, and I will show that to everybody today again, as a kind of a starting point. But I like to describe that demo as not quite an Ember app because it almost uses no add-ons. And we have a lot of people in the call here today, and I would like to know how many people in the call are maintaining an Ember app with no add-ons at all. I don't think there's going to be a single person with their hand up. That's the point. We're supposed to be sharing code with everybody, and add-ons are a big part of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with essentially a demo of what Ed showed at EmberConf. And we'll have a look at what it outputs, what it looks like, and then we'll step to the next step. We'll go to where we are currently, what everybody could try today if they want to, and then what are we doing next and how close are we? So this is a little repo that I put together, Ember Vite app. It says it in the README that this is essentially just extracting a test app that's in the Embroider mono repo, but in such a way that you can clone this repo, run pnpm install, pnpm start, and it will just work, which is great. So that is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to make sure that I'm on the main branch, which I am. I'm going to cancel all my demos that I may or may not have been finishing just before the call. I'm going to do pnpmi, and I'm going to do two things. I'm going to run pnpm. Actually, I'm going to do pnpm start pre-build. Make this a bit wider so everybody can see. And you can see that that started very quickly. In fact, it can be a lot quicker than that. If you do an edit, it will happen practically instantaneously. But this is a bit of a lie. This is what we know. This is what we use with Ember CLI today. But this doesn't actually, and as you'll probably notice, there's no started watching on port 4200. You can't run this app. This app is just converting your app from the old way of doing things to the new way of doing things. To actually run your app, you need to do dev, which is this. I'll explain what this little RMRF is doing in a second. So now we have two processes running. One, which is our pre-build, and the other, which is Vite itself actually running. And if we go to, here's one I prepared earlier, the Ember app on localhost 5174, just double check that's actually the one that we're working on, we have an Ember app booted up. It's actually working. This is actually being run through Vite, and this is the same demo that Ed showed in EmberConf. Now, this is great. This is wonderful. Let's go and have a look and see what happens when we change things. Let's put a H1 hi Ember Europe. I can't spell Europe. And we see that things changed and practically instantaneously things loaded. I had to push refresh because I think there's a little bug that the live reload doesn't quite work as expected, but there was no delay there. There's no idea of you need to do a rebuild here. The actual rebuild from the Ember's perspective took 28 milliseconds, and Vite essentially did nothing. And why did Vite do nothing? Well, if you look at the network tab and clear this, you'll see, I hope everybody can see that. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You'll see that if you filter by JavaScript, you start getting a lot more JavaScript files loading in your browser. There's tons. And that's what all this stuff is here as well. Every single module that your app uses is being requested independently, which is kind of cool. And this is kind of the point of why Vite is kind of awesome. So what we are looking for here is if we look for application HBS, we get to see the actual content of the application HBS. Helpfully, it puts a little comment of what the template looks like, because there's a lot of stuff happening here. This is the wire format of an Ember template. You can see here that it loads that directly. But you can also see other things. So in our example, if we look for example, every template, every component is its own module. You have this.fancy, which if we look at example, it's importing fancy from components fancy.gjs. You can look at fancy, and it's here. And this is an actual GJS component. And this is 1,000 times better for debugging something's going wrong in your build or in your app or whatever. You don't have to work through like Broccoli compiled asset JSs or vendor JSs. You don't have to look at anything Webpack gives you. You're actually looking at modules that are being requested from the browser. Now, this isn't all good news. The challenge with this is that the only thing that a Vite app can load is an ESM module, a real ESM module. And in the same vein that everybody, probably nobody put up their hand when I asked, are you running an Ember app without any add-ons? I bet that every single person in this call and every single person using Ember has dependencies that aren't fully converted to ESM. That is true of your third-party dependencies, but it's also true of Ember itself. Like, we haven't finished the work to be ESM only and everything from start to finish. And what that means is, as soon as with this demo, you start using an add-on that depends on a common JS, a CJS, dependency, it's going to break. And why is that? Because when I ran this command, I did a rm node modules embroider rewritten app node modules Vite. So I've killed this .vite folder. That .vite folder, node modules.vite, it's empty in my example here. There's nothing there. And that .vite folder is where Vite puts all of its dependency optimized, what it learns about your app, essentially. So it converts all of your CGS dependencies into ESM for you and puts them in here. But the reason why this is empty is because this example, essentially the same thing that was there for EmberConf, doesn't do dependency discovery pretty much at all. It does everything browser only, which, as I said, like, it's not the best, but it actually is actively harmful if you have dependencies that aren't already converted to ESM. So that's the current state of things. The next example of what, how do I hide this thing? Hide video panel? No. Show video panel. I guess I could just drag it out of the way. Aha, I'll put it on a different screen. Perfect. Okay. So that's the current state of affairs. So if you go to the Manson Ember Vite app, you can try this out and you can do this demo yourself on your own machine. The upcoming update to that is what is currently being released from Embroider as unstable. For anybody who doesn't know what that means, whenever we merge something into the Embroider monorepo, we have an automatic CI job that just bumps a patch version and adds this unstable suffix to it. So if you ever want to install then what's coming up next in Embroider, you can always install embroider/core or @embroider/compat @embroider/core Vite @latest, and it will install that latest thing for you. And that's what I've done here. What that means is essentially this is a preview of what is currently on main but hasn't been published as stable right now. So this has got a pretty cool system for actually doing the release. All we need to do is merge this and it will automatically do the release for us, and it will like bump things that need to be majors, etc. automatically. But some of the stuff in here, let me see, enhancement, add ES build resolver. You can see this pull request prepare release on the Embroider repo, and you can see all of the things if you want to go and spelunk through pull requests. But this ES build resolver is how Vite discovers your dependencies. So by changing the example app that I have running to use the unstable version, I'm getting that ES build resolver and I can run it locally. So let's do that now. Update to unstable, swap over to it. I have a local change. What's that local change? My hello Ember Europe. Let's close everything. PMPMI. So we're swapping from stable to unstable Embroider. And then we're going to go PMPM pre-build, start pre-build. And we're going to do the same thing here that we did a second ago, where we delete this .ember, the .embroider .vite folder, and we'll have a look at what it does. So we refresh, we get an error. But we get a interesting kind of error. This error comes from the Vite plugin import analysis. So it's telling me that it's not able to find the Ember welcome page component when it's trying to discover all of the dependencies and pre-build them and optimize them for us, turn them to ESM, etc. So essentially, we're stuck here. We can go and have a look at the rewritten app node modules Vite depths, and we can see that it's a bit bigger. I hope that people can see this. If you look at the Vite depths, you can see that there's a lot of stuff in here. And essentially, this is kind of akin to bundling all of your dependencies. And you can see like the names of the dependencies. So QUnit DOM, we've got Ember source pieces, we've got chunks, which is interesting. I'll chat about that in a second. But everything that you would expect an Ember app to have gets piped into your Vite depths. And when you try and load the app, it doesn't do everything through the browser. It uses these pre-bundled depths as much as possible. So essentially what we've got here is it's doing more work, but it's not doing enough work. So it's not quite there to actually cross the line, to actually get this to a point where people would reasonably expect it to work for their app. So how do we do that? We've got another demo, our last demo for the evening. So this might be a bit shorter than Rich's talk, but this pull request, interesting. I didn't even know I've got CI running on this. But this pull request, if we skip all the other stuff, which I will talk about in a second, stops using actually deployed Embroider dependencies and starts using my local linked dependencies. So we'll swap over to that. Oh, interesting. I think I had already done that demo when I was practicing. And then we're going to kill all this stuff, make this smaller, do a PNPMI over here. I don't, oh no, we do need to do that. Yeah, that's fine. And then we're going to go, yeah, pre-build on this side. This should work, hopefully. And then dev on this side. So what are we going to see? What do we expect to see when we run this? We have a failure. This is a expected failure, by the way. I had teed this up because I wanted to show something that is a explanation of what I said in the first example. Whenever you get something like this, that is clearly an artifact of the bundler or some part of the system, including, like if you read the message, it says that Glimmer Validator has been included twice in the application, which is not a valid thing for Glimmer Validator. You have to have it only exactly once. That's an assertion thrown by Glimmer Validator itself. And you can see here that it's actually thrown from a chunk. So this is the stuff that I was telling you before. So this is coming directly from our node modules, Vite dependencies. So what you expect with a chunk, it's the same with Webpack. If there are lots of dependencies that all depend on the same thing, it puts those into a common chunk that gets loaded first or on demand or whatever. So it's like a known chunk that has all of these dependencies. It's not just one thing. It's like lots of different things. In this case, it's from Ember source. Glimmer related things are in this chunk. Makes sense. But what you would do in the past with Webpack is you'd try and interpret the JavaScript files that Webpack outputs. And they're usually evals. It's usually almost impossible to understand exactly what Webpack is doing. But here, everything's a module. You can search. So what we tend to do in this case to try and find out, oh, okay, it's been included twice. Well, who's including it? And this is a really interesting one, because This is actually the same file being included twice. This is not what you expect. When I was debugging this before and getting it to this point where trying to get ESBuild to discover all your dependencies, what you get is you get this chunk for sure. That's the discovered one during the pre-build. But then you also get a direct link to the validator file itself. And then you have to go and have a look at who tried to import Ember Validator and what chain what it used to get there. I'll show what that looks like in a second. But this is not the same thing. This is something else. This is the same file, but included with query parameters T and V. I don't exactly know what they're supposed to stand for, but the thing that you do know is that this is a side effect of cache busting and hot module reloading. So to get past this error, the unfortunate thing is that you have to go into your config, your Vite config, and you have to turn off hot module reloading. This is very sad. We're all here because we want to have hot module reloading, but it is not necessarily. Oh, I'm going to have to just kill everything to make sure. Oop, definitely saved that. I did. I really hope this actually starts. It's also another thing that I have noticed, that sometimes you need to kill everything because it sometimes has a this is definitely the right. We don't want this to work. Come on. Network console. Huh. That does look like hot module reloading. HMR false is still on. Am I in the right place? And PPD. Yeah. Start dev. I literally had this working just before the call. Do have another Vite app open. I don't know if that's going to make a difference. Huh. I don't know why that's not working. This was working 5 seconds ago. But the point is that all you would get was the exact same demo that we had at the beginning of this, but just the dependencies are in different places. So instead of everything coming through as direct file dependencies straight off the file system, it starts to I'm going to try this one. Yeah, still didn't work. Yeah, that's weird. It starts to try and load things from these chunks, from these pre-discovered dependencies during the initialization step. So we do have a lot more work to do. What I actually did when I swapped to using local is I swapped to using my local copy of Embroider, which I can't actually zoom in on this screen, but it's using a local super mega branch, which is just merging a lot of stuff that myself and Ed are working on Embroider itself. You can see here that this is a search for pull requests by either myself and Ed where the label is breaking. So each one of these pull requests, when we merge them, they're going to be a breaking change to Embroider itself. That means this is one of the things that we decided, I think it was last week, that we want to start merging these sooner rather than later, because we want to get our Vite example, the thing that I just showed you, we want to get it to a point where it's actually discovering everything correctly and people can consume it without having to fork the Embroider repo and like link it and compile it and do all those things. All we want people to do is install the unstable versions, the latest unstable version, which is my second demo, and for things to get all the way through to the end and actually work, essentially. And we are close to getting some of these things merged, but every single time that we change something, we either break expectations that are already there in the ecosystem, or we find bugs in PNPM, in Node itself. Like there's a lot of bugs that we're trying to sidestep here. But it's not that far. I was very close to having this with a legitimate test for people to actually install for today, but we're not quite there yet. By this time next week, we could have merged all 4 of these, and then unstable would be the good example that I wasn't quite able to show today, but it's slightly infuriating. But the thing I did want to show you, I don't know if it's going to show us here. In fact, it will, because yeah, okay. So oh, actually, this is a great example. So the thing that we're seeing here is that there's a particular file, chunk etlkuedd. We know why this is failing. This is because of the hot module reloading. We need to fix this so that it understands these extra query parameters and doesn't try and load it twice. But if it was the other version, we could search for chunk, what was it called? ETLK. ETLK. See, there are 2. There should only be 1. Ember source. Yeah, that's weird. But the idea is you should be able to see who imported this thing. And when you're working in a Vite world, all you need to do is look at the network tab, see where the module is being imported, and then you can see exactly who imported that module because it was a network request, who initiated that network request. And you can follow the chain from the Vite app. That's our entry point at the moment. Our Vite app imported a virtual dependency on implicit modules. Implicit modules then imports Ember source, Ember index, so essentially Ember source. And then that Ember source was importing something from this chunk. But then we can go and copy this file, find that in here, Ember source, whatever it was. And there we go. And we can look at the preview, and then we can see exactly where it's importing each of the chunks, which is it's just a world of difference compared to what we've been stuck in. And this isn't just in terms of broccoli, this is in terms of like having to deal with Webpack, because Webpack is very hard to interpret these sorts of things. I guess that's it. It's a real shame that actually didn't work. It did work just before the call, but demos, you know what they're like. But that's it.